standing up, bracing for a bomb to fall. And I was flooded with security, but also with recognition that I was back amongst the secure, and I had left behind people who had no such luxury. Now I'd like to impart to you a very sunny image, if you will, from my childhood. I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago. We were close to Midway Airport. The planes would fly overhead with great regularity, and I could so clearly remember the day when finally I could shed the training wheels on my little bicycle and start to bicycle and catch up with my sisters and go to the corner. I remember careening down the street. I finally knew how to ride a bike, and I could count the planes with my sisters. The world was so secure. Never did we imagine being in one of those planes. Certainly we never imagined being attacked by one of those planes. What a secure world I grew up in. And isn't this partly the security that we crave, we yearn for the children we love, for the loved ones in our lives? And yet, the price seems repeatedly to be that our planes must take off, they must fly very far away, they must fall, they must strike the tide of bloodletting with different excuses. May I tell you the story of an Iraqi child? He stayed in my home for a short time. I first met him in Jordan. Omar, one of the most beautiful children you could ever meet. He was with his dad in something like an SUV that was driving several passengers, and suddenly near their hometown of Mosul, there was an attack, and United States soldiers, not sure where to shoot, thought that when the driver of this car, trying to get out of the scene of the attack, peeled off down an exit ramp, that maybe that was a getaway car for the attackers, shot at the car, the engine burst into flame. Omar's father was able to grab him out of the car, couldn't go back in to get his mother, and Omar, half his body burned, sat next to his father with bullets riddling his body while they watched his mother burn inside the car. Omar is in the United States now. Plastic surgeons have done their very best to heal the scars that cover half of his body. His father has decided to stay in the United States. Their brother Ali will be reunited with them. I know they're surrounded by some of the finest people in the world. But one of those finest people in the world recently wrote to me. She said, Omar generally seems happy, but he persistently plays a game with his two stuffed toys. One is Mama, and one is Baby. And Mama always dies, and Baby is always abandoned. How can we adequately say we're sorry? We're so very sorry to all of the many Iraqis who bear the bereavement, the scars, the horrors of war. For a lifetime, they'll be affected. It's uneasy, isn't it, to sense in our media that somehow a narrative is going into the lore of this country that says, yes, it was a very rough spell there. The years 2006, 2007 were horrific, but now the surge has happened. And the U.S. military surge showed so much resilience on the part of United States planners for war that things are getting better in Iraq. The violence has abated, and in fact now the military can move over to Afghanistan, to Pakistan, a new time of bloodletting with different excuses. But how dare we accommodate any language that would speak about success in Iraq? Because we should be apologizing with the deepest possible sorrow to Omar and to people all across Iraq for the years when the United States funded both sides of the horrific Iran-Iraq war, for the 13 years of brutally and legally punitive economic sanctions, for the shock and awe bombing, and it was shocking and it was awful, for the unchecked looting, for the idle watching the United States seem to be doing while it really was disbanding any kind of governments within Iraq, for the exile of the middle class, for the rotting infrastructure of their oil industry, which might have been able to help them now while their economy is in tatters, for the shame and the humiliation that so many people have felt as they have fled from their homes and become refugees. 6 years of chaos and bloodshed. We ought to be articulating the words, "We're sorry. We're so very sorry," with a passion that would then fuel our resolve to say, never again. Never again will we do this. Never again will we commit such an abomination against other people. And yet, much to the contrary, it would seem that leaders are gearing us up to say, well, quite possibly, as the war that's gone on in Afghanistan escalates, and as the United States sets its sights toward Pakistan.